All right, hello everybody, and welcome to our Africa Week, Communications Week presentation and workshop and lab from Kigali Forward. My name is Autumn Marie. I am the founder and managing director of Kigali Forward here in Rwanda. We are a mission-based brand strategy agency that is committed to shifting and expanding the narrative around Rwanda and Africa, and also to uplifting the brands and things that are happening here in Kigali, and lastly, about developing the skills in the local market. So for this session, we want to focus on the new audio frontier and talk about using Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces for your clients. They have been, huge topics that everyone is talking about. Clubhouse was ablaze and it recently came to Androids and is making its way across the continent with availability. And Twitter Spaces has been out now almost for 7 months. But we want to talk about how do you not just use it for personal use, but how do you really leverage it for your clients and your campaigns? So looking forward to having this conversation and to really having an interactive session with everyone. So I'm going to go over some of the basics about the two platforms, but the real purpose of this is to be able to have a interactive question answer session where you can ask real questions if you're not on the platforms, and you have basic questions if you're on the platforms but haven't quite figured them out, or maybe you tried it and you couldn't get it, or you felt that it was just overwhelming with a lot of the conversations happening there. This will give you an opportunity to be able to ask some of those things and hopefully either get you on or get you to come back, or make you download them. So that said, let's go ahead and jump in. Thank you to those who are here. I am going to share my screen. Second. Okay. So, oh, okay. Sorry, this is actually not taking me directly there. One moment. Let me just share content directly. Give me a moment. Okay, we are on. Let me bring this up. All right, so let's bring this back to here. Oops, I'm gonna just close out and come back into here. Okay, there we go, in real time. All right, so first thing I want to talk about is just the new audio frontier. Actually, if people can raise their hands, let me come back into here and see if we can, if you have Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces, if people can raise their hands. Okay, I see some hands that are up, or you can drop it in the chat. I just want to get an idea of who actually has Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces and who's actually using them. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, and in the spirit of making this interactive, I'm actually gonna feel free to unmute. I'm gonna, oops. Yep, so if anyone wants to unmute and say, which one you have, I'm curious to see, are people on Clubhouse or are people on Spaces? Are people on both of them? Okay, I'm seeing more people raising hands. Awesome. Okay, great. And okay, great. I'm seeing, okay, great. Seeing more people are in Twitter Spaces. Okay, great to hear. All right, so I'm going to take us back to and just go over what some of the basics are so that if you're on one but not on both, you can learn about what the other one has to offer. So audio has really been, even before Clubhouse emerged last year, and Clubhouse emerged in March of last year. And even before Clubhouse emerged, audio was really sitting at the new frontier, with podcasts being the most consumed and audio overall being the most consumed form of media, or fastest growing. And so that's both with podcasts, with audiobooks, and it was already moving ahead. And then comes onto the scene last March, Clubhouse. And so when Clubhouse first came out in last March, I'm gonna give you all a brief history of it and kind of how it's grown to where it is today, and then some quick facts on it. And we'll do the same thing with Twitter Spaces. And then I want to open up a conversation for how we're able to use that to actually build for our client campaigns. So Clubhouse came out and just put it on the screen so everyone can make sure that you're actually downloading the right app. When it originally came out last March, it was invite only. It is still invite only, but it was a very small group of people who had it, and mainly people who were in tech, other people who were influencers connected to that world, and it was only for iPhone. It just so happened that it was well timed with COVID and everybody being indoors. So not so much with the COVID part, but with the quarantine part and everyone being indoors. And so it gave everyone an outlet to be able to connect. It started to really pick up steam and start to have murmurs going around and people hearing about it like last June and July going into August, but still very much still a very tight group of people. And come August, September, it started to diversify more, and people who had been some of the very early adopters started to call for more diversification on the app and wanting to see more people of more diverse backgrounds represented. And so you started to see it open up more in September, October, and then November greatly started to open up and have a lot more people being invited in and coming into this year. And then most recently, in the last few weeks, it has opened up to Android and started to spread across countries globally in the Android market. So it's been interesting to watch it grow as a member who's been on since September and to see the different phases that it has gone through. It has been interesting to see the amount of creativity that people have had with it, with everything from reading time of people reading books together to the Lion King production that happened in December with Noelle Chesmore that she put together. That was just amazing and brought in a new wave of actually doing musicals that were and plays happening in real life time. Most recently, they did Fela, and then seeing, amazing fundraisers happen with Stop Asian Hate, with the snowstorms that happen across Texas. And so seeing all of these things happen, seeing the different countries come in Africa, I think Nigeria definitely led the early wave. And then later seeing other countries come in and starting their own clubs. And then seeing great rooms like A Tribe Called Diaspora, like Afropolitan Lounge, and different places where the different countries across the continent coming together, seeing things like listening parties and sessions for artists that were coming out within particular countries. So having seen it used in a variety of ways, and then just thinking about how are we really engaging with it as publicists and brand marketing strategists. So this is one of the PR clubs that I put up here just to kind of give us an idea. There are a ton of PR and marketing clubs, which we'll talk a little bit more about once we get into Q&A, so that I'm not just talking at everybody, but we'll talk more about like the power of using these clubs to be able to connect with other professionals, not just in our region, but around the world, and to be able to trade best practices and to be able to see how other people are not just using the platform, but other things that exist right now in the industry as well. So here are some of the quick facts about it. Clubhouse is a standalone app. So unlike Twitter Spaces, which is a part of a larger app, this is its own standalone app, which means that you have to download it from scratch. You're starting your followers from scratch. and your identity and everything is starting out from scratch. So unlike being able to come into Twitter. And it is just a little over a year old. So it's about 15 months old at this point. You're only supposed to have individual accounts, meaning beginning, it is all about creator first, but also about individuals and real people and being able to actually connect with other humans versus where you have brands on other platforms when you go to Facebook, when you go to Twitter, when you are on Instagram, and you're often interacting with brands. This is really about the individual and the individual creator. So this is all, everybody essentially is supposed to have an individual account and that it's matched to your real name. And there's like one person to each account. So you're not supposed to have any brand accounts on there. So that means not for your PR company, not for, your client's PR company or your client's company or campaign, but instead you are doing the work with that actual person. And then everything is happening in real time audio. So one of the things that has been great and amazing about things being in real time audio means that you have to actually be present. And especially in the earlier days of quarantine, last summer, end of the summer, when people were indoors a lot more before things really started to open up, then it gave us a way to actually be able to hear voices in a very intimate way and up close way, and to be able to do it in real time. So if you miss a room, there's no going back to hear it. It is not recorded and kept on the platform in the same way that per se, if you're streaming something to YouTube in real time, you can later go back and watch it. That does not exist. You can record rooms on Clubhouse. However, you do need to put in the title that you're recording. It is against the policy to be recording without people knowing. So that, and the way that is important is because then when you're doing client campaigns or working with your clients, the part about this is that it allows the general public to feel like they're having an up close and personal conversation. So for instance, the cast of Bronzeville did an amazing Meet the Cast. And if anyone wants to know, Bronzeville is an amazing it's an audio show in and of itself that Lorenz Tate has created along with Lawrence Fishburne, and it has Tika Sumter, and a whole other, like a huge star lineup of people who have been in it on exist in podcast format, but isn't that. And so they did a great the cast. And what's great about that, and there's been a ton of other, obviously the largest thing, of course, was one of the largest moments, of course, was when Elon Musk came on to Clubhouse. And also when Mark Zuckerberg came on, some of the larger, people who've come on, Oprah, and people then feel like they're having these up close conversations with the, with the artist, with the actor, or with even just the owner or the CEO. So, and there's also been some great conversations as well for any of you who are working within like lobbying or NGO sector or within politics and government. There have also been some great rooms that have happened with politicians, with people in office, with people who head up organizations and around issues. So that's the biggest thing, is it is allowing people on both of these platforms to be wise and accessible. So we need to think about how do we use that to our advantage for our campaigns, especially when we've been so used to building in a visual world, and where the last several years, the last 10 or more years, we have constantly been pushing visual. And now we're moving into this space where it's not just about visuals, but it's actually, there aren't any visuals and it's audio. So if you do have brands that you're working with or organizations who are your clients, though they can't have accounts, they can have clubs and they can sponsor events. And one of the good things around being able to promote is that you can schedule events ahead of time and promote, promote across platforms. So that means that you can schedule it, people can see it, you can tweet it out, you can post it on LinkedIn, and people can also then put it on their Google Calendar when they see it. And then I want to switch over to Twitter Spaces and do the quick facts there, and then open it up for us to have more of a conversation around it and talk about how we use this, some of the things that I've seen, some of the thoughts, some of the conversations, and any direct questions people have. So Twitter Spaces is a Twitter integration. It is about 7 months old. It was announced I believe it was November, and it is not invite only. It was not invite only in the way that you personally could invite other people. It started out as invite only from Twitter. And so Twitter was inviting people in to be early adopters. And then a few weeks ago, they actually opened it up to everybody. I believe it's with over 500 or 600 users who now have access. And so the good thing about that is that you're not starting from scratch. You're already dealing with the followers that you have been working on since 2009, 2013, 2015, whenever you join Twitter, and you're able to let a whole new profile for yourself, and you're starting out from zero. The other thing is that brands can use their company accounts. So that means that you can have your company, whether it's your agency or whether it's your client's company, they can actually be hosting the space themselves and can have a voice coming out of that mic. So I've seen some great spaces with particularly news outlets, with USA Today, the Washington Post, some of the other outlets who are doing great pieces where the brand will open the space, but then maybe they'll have some of their key journalists in doing really good recaps of the news or other quizzes around things in the news. Similar to Clubhouse, it is real-time audio. And you can also, I'm gonna fix this typo here because this is driving me nuts. But you can also, plan and schedule your events ahead of time and then promote them across platforms. People cannot integrate them into their Google Calendar in the same way, but it does have other really amazing features that involves visuals. So whereas on Clubhouse, you're usually doing PTR, which means Twitter Spaces, what you can do is actually put tweets in the space. And so people can actually see tweets and visuals while they're talking. It's a little bit more interactive. Everybody who is in the Twitter space is able to actually comment through a choice of 5 different emojis, versus on Clubhouse, the only people who are able to participate in the conversation or able to clap are the people who are speaking in the conversation. So if you haven't been on either platform, none of that may mean anything to you. It may just all be words. So that said, I'm going to come back and open it up so that we can have more of a conversation. All right. So if we can open it up for people who have questions or comments, you can raise your hand. That would be great. So I want to invite you into conversation so that we can have some real-time conversation. So I want to talk about in this, like, if you've been using it and you're like, but how do I make this work for my client? I've used it personally, or you might even just be tired out already on your own. And especially in Clubhouse, you're seeing the hallway, and in your hallway, you're seeing the same conversations that are happening. And perhaps you already are like, I'm gone. This has nothing to do with me. It's not professional. It's people trying to sell things. It's ratchet, or it's just not appealing to you, or it's just too much noise, or it just feels like a whole other job on top of the other things that you're already doing. We want to talk about, while you are waiting on some people to raise their hands, while we're waiting on that, I wanted to give you a couple of tips around that. One of the first tips is, like, making Clubhouse work for you. Go to your search function. So even while you're in this webinar right now, open up your Clubhouse app on your phone if you're on Clubhouse. And the first thing that I'm going to suggest to you is to actually go to your, if you close your profile and you see the little circle that is the search button, and click on that. One of the first things I want to suggest is find people to follow that are about things you want to talk about, especially if you followed the suggested list when you came in. So whatever topic it is, if it's public relations, if it is brand marketing, if it is a particular, if it's a particular country that you're located in, you want to be able to connect with, whatever it is, if it is an industry, any of those things, find those people who are already doing it. That's the first thing. Second thing is you can also slide that bar over to clubs and search clubs. And once you start to follow the clubs that are related to your interests, those things will start to pop up in your hallway. And it will start to minimize the noise of the things that you do not want to hear about. So let me see if actually, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and show you what I'm talking about. I'll just put it on my iPad for you. Okay. So, right. So this is Clubhouse, and you should be seeing it on my screen. It's sideways, but nonetheless. All right, so you go to people, and you're searching. You can put in anything it is that you want to look for here. And so let's say you're looking for marketing. It's going to be a ton of people that'll come up. But think about it just like LinkedIn. Look for the people who you want to connect with. And depending on how, let's see how Wi-Fi is working. It's going to hold Zoom and searching. Okay, it is not coming up, but you can also, when bandwidth is. Sorry about that. My Wi-Fi kicked me off, but I'm not sure if you all got to see the video when I was showing the screen. Let me see if I can pull it up again. Okay. All right, so back to, okay, this is still, be just because I'm sharing screen from Zoom and Clubhouse might think that I'm trying to record from it. So, but that said, if you search for either one of those, really treat it like LinkedIn so that you can find those people that you want to connect with, and think about the people who are going to be interested in the things that you're doing for your client. On Twitter Spaces, it's all about who you already follow, well, who already follows you, that will see what you have that's happening in Spaces, and you can tweet it out in real time to those people, and anyone in your Spaces can tweet it out. All right. I want to take a break and come over to questions. So if people can raise their hands, that would be awesome, because I don't want to spend this whole time just talking and going on about it. And especially since the screen sharing is not working, to be able to actually show the Clubhouse screen. So I would love to open it up if people can raise hands. Oops. Great. Anybody and any questions around, let me take this off. I somehow have, Maurice, can you actually take my hand off? Somehow I raised mine trying to see if people had their hands up. Okay, I see yours, Hamidi, I'm coming for you. Oh, I think you probably need to do it from the host side to be able to unmute the people with their raised hands. Is your mic open, Muhammadia? from Wax Print Media? Can you unmute Wax Print Media's mic? I saw the hands up, but it's not unmuting. Okay, so yours should be unmuted from Wax Print Media. You should be able to open up your mic. Can you try to open your mic up for Wax Print Media? Okay, that's okay. If not, if you can just drop your question in the chat. Not sure if there's, for some reason, if you're having an issue unmuting, but if people can drop the questions in the chat, that would be great, because I want to really address, and thank you, Latifa, I want to really address some of the actual questions people have and some of the actual campaigns that you're working on so that we can talk more specifically. Like, this was definitely not meant to be a full out presentation for the hour. We definitely wanted to be able to talk directly to what questions people have, the types of campaigns you're working on, and to be able to actually workshop through some ideas of how you can use both of these platforms. So please raise your hands, please come into conversation. All right. I see someone else's hand up, if you can unmute. Yes.
Yes, so I've got a question around sort of trends. There's been a lot of talk around how there's movement away from Clubhouse towards maybe more Twitter Spaces. And I saw that some brands are a bit hesitant about Clubhouse and, the viability, the long-term viability. How are you seeing that shift since you're on both Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you. Great question. And I think it's also a great question for individuals, even if you're thinking of being on as your individual brand. So a lot of people are talking about it. And I think that it's two different conversations between where is that as tech viability and where is that as a social app viability. Clubhouse is not going anywhere. I think that what has happened is that people, and I think really, especially people who've come in since December, have come into and especially February, where there was a huge influx of people, they've come into a very different Clubhouse than what we came into pre-last December, pre-last November. So there was a lot more people were on, things were not open. And also it was a lot more closed and it was a lot more invitation. So the quality of the conversations and the type of conversations have greatly shifted as well. So I think that has all impacted it. And then the other thing I would say is that I think what's happening right now is some people are going to move and the dust is going to settle. Clubhouse has, announced their Creator First program with the 20 creators. There's also the deal that the NYU girls just got, which was a huge deal. They just sort of goes around the audio collective that's also come out of it. And so it's not going anywhere, but I think the difference is going to be is that those who have adapted and found their place in it are going to continue. Who have not found their place in that or came in and didn't find that, and where Twitter Spaces suits brands more is because they can have their own account. You can't leverage a brand account in Clubhouse, and where you're not starting from scratch. And so I think it's no different than it is 2021, and there's still people who are like, I haven't figured out Twitter Spaces. And, we're always like, it's 2021. I'm sorry, not Twitter Spaces, Twitter. And we all know people who still have not figured out Twitter. And I think it's going to be similar, where there's going to be those who adapt. And it's kind of with any hot trend, a hot trend that comes, people hop on it. And that trend may stay and continue as something that exists. And then there's those who fall off of it, because they never fully learned how to leverage it. So I think it is still a huge platform. It's not getting the same amount of downloads it was getting before. I think the craze is gone from it, and it's going to take a lot more work for people coming in now to learn how to leverage it. But it is still a great place to be able to use as a platform and to be able to reach people. But it's all about how you're building it. And the other thing I would say, the last thing I would do is with Spaces is that it seems challenge of Spaces, and I've been on Spaces for a few months, is that there's not as many people using it or used to it yet. So it's still a new space, no pun intended, for people to get into. And so like everyone still hasn't even realized that they have these new little purple dots when you hit the feather to be able to write something new, that there's these purple dots, and that's what it is. If you're not programming consistently within Spaces, it's just as difficult as it is in Clubhouse to get people coming. And so the key to either is consistency, but I do think that the Spaces doesn't have as many people that are regularly active on it in the same way, and you don't see as many Spaces. It's not as searchable yet, like in terms of actually being able to search Spaces. That's something that they're still working on in a beta form.
Great, thanks. And just a follow-up question to that. So you mentioned on how in Clubhouse, brands cannot, they cannot start their own sort of room. They cannot create their own accounts, but that they can start, I think you said, they can start their own clubs. And could you speak more about how you can start a club? So even as an individual, but also as a brand, and then also how brands can sponsor different clubs or different rooms. How's that working? How are you seeing that playing out?
Yes, great questions. So for your club, so it has gotten automated at this point. So before, in the early days of Clubhouse, back when it was a whole process of actually like filling out a form and then waiting, and they were being done manually. So it meant that somebody was going in, checking each one. And at some point it took a week or 2 weeks. And then as it started to grow around November, December, it took months. And so it is finally automated now. And so if you want to start a club on there, you go to your profile, and in your settings, you'll see the option to be able to start a club. And if you go to FAQs, when you hit that little wheel up at the top right corner, I wish I could show the screen from Clubhouse, but it keeps dropping out every time I try to, because I think it's sensing a recording. But in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see that there is the wheel. And if you tap that and go to FAQs, you'll see the question on how to start, how to apply for a club. And now it happens automated. And usually if you start doing rooms around and they see you're regularly doing that, plus you've submitted, then it will give you a club. And then you can invite people to join, and you can make it so that you have other people who are also moderators of the club, admins of the club, or it can be just you. And so you want to be careful about who you make an admin of a club, because then they have the opportunity to make changes in it, as well as being able to end the club. And the biggest thing with the club is that, again, just being consistent so that you start to build up that following, and so that people know what they're coming for. So even though a brand doesn't have an account, what you can do is, for a client, is that you can start doing events through it and start doing for that brand. So let's say any brand that there is, let's just say Kigali Forward, right? My own company. So I would start a club, and I could name the club Kigali Forward. And then it would be me as an individual doing the programming, but it could be built around who we are as a brand for Kigali Forward. As far as sponsorship, there have been some brands who've been coming in, and a few things are happening. There has been some talk of brands coming to the founders and kind of asking for suggestions on creators and people who can host rooms. There have been brands who just paying attention to who actually has been, having good followings and engagements on the platform, and asking them to host things. So there was also, oh my gosh, I cannot remember the name of this club, but it was really cool. It was a quiz show that they would do, and they actually had, I forget which brand it was that they had like names out in it, and they actually came and were sponsoring them, and they had monetary prizes that they were giving away to people who were playing in the quiz show. So that's one of the ways that it popped up. And I forget the name of the quiz show, but they had a brand actually come in and give them money to sponsor out, and sponsor them in that way. But there's also been other brands coming in, being willing to sponsor conversations and paying the moderators to be able to moderate the conversations or events. So even Even when you talk about Fela, I know Fela, when they did the Fela production recently, and to raise awareness around NSARS, and it was Fela Thankful, where the number that came behind it was around the day where the shootings happened on the toll. And that has some sponsorship around it as well. So it's all about how you're putting the event together and not limiting yourself to thinking about the fact that this is an audio platform, but thinking about what you want to create, period. And then thinking about how do I do that on an audio platform? Because if we think about just doing it and that you're on this audio platform, it's restrictive, because then you're already put up these parameters and you're thinking in a more traditional audio platform way. But once you start to just think of what kind of experience it is that you want to create. So for instance, the meet and greets we talked about with cast members, things like that. People have done watch parties. They've watch parties for the Oscars, or, meeting some of the nominees, all of these things. Think about what you would do in real life. We've been living virtual now for over a year. So it's really thinking about the experience that you want to create. And then you think about, how do I do this on this platform? So I hope that answers the question. And I see there are a few more people. Okay. And then, okay, so someone said, can you tell us where Clubhouse members are located? So not sure if that means like Clubhouse members in terms of like in the world where they're located, but all over the world, minus China at this point. China was on for a bit, and then China took access to the app off, but I believe everyone else has had access to the app at this point. The only issue before was that it was iPhone only, but it has been expanded to Android and started rolling out in the US and then English speaking parts of Europe, but now has rolled out. I know it's here in Rwanda now, and it has hit other parts of the continent, and so is making its way around globally for Androids. So, and every time a country joined Clubhouse, you saw a huge wave of it coming in. Japan made a huge wave. Nigeria made a big wave. Who else made a big wave when they came on? Germany. And there's been really cool things people have done, even in their own languages, or having translators in to be able to have global conversations, which is also something to think about too, depending on where you're based. And if you're Francophone, if you're Anglophone, who you want your audience to be. Some people have done programming in Kiswahili. There are like Yoruba classes that happen on there. So I've seen people on a continent using it in different ways and using their own translators as part of it as well. All right, Mina, I see you.
Yeah, awesome. Hi, hello everyone. Very great and insightful presentation. I must say I'm technically very new to Clubhouse. I'll say I'm just about 3 weeks old, but the experience has really, really been great. So I had the opportunity, after joining a few rooms and clubs, the topics that are discussed, well, it depending on which interest you have, it's quite interesting. But I'm thinking, do you foresee Clubhouse taking over radio? So, for example, I was able to get to speak to the moderators of a club who had special interest in vehicles and the automotive industry. So I managed to get them a speaker who sort of answered a lot of their questions. Normally, if he was going to do that on radio, that would come at a charge, right? So I'm just thinking what opportunities there are in Clubhouse compared to radio, because we'll get to a time people won't be buying the airtime that they're spending money on radio, but will be moving to spaces like Clubhouse, where already there's a group of people who are already interested in the topic you want to discuss and are actually keen on knowing more about that, instead of radio, where, of course, every radio has their own target audience, but the target audience segmentation is quite broad when you compare radio to Clubhouse. So I'm just asking whether you foresee Clubhouse taking over some aspects of radio?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that depends on market, but I don't think radio is going anywhere. I think that's really just in terms of seeing what's interesting is that when Clubhouse first started, and then even with the show Bronzeville that I was talking about, if anyone has not seen Bronzeville, I'm from Chicago, and so I'm very partial, and obviously like being from the US and being from Chicago, but even if you're not, take a listen to it because it has just taken, I think that that's going to also be a whole new frontier and has been ahead of its time, because I think when Lorenz Tatum put the first episode out, it was like 2018, and then they just renewed up for a season. But just the way that they bring what sounds like, it reminds me of old radio when we think of our parents sitting around and listening to radio and hearing an actual show. And so Clubhouse to me was very similar to that. And it took me back to actually the life that our parents lived, where they would sit next to the radio and listen, right, intently. And that's where they were getting not just news, but shows. And it was a whole different level of programming than what we're used to, where the radio for us is mainly music, unless you're listening to talk radio. And so in the beginning of Clubhouse, I felt that way about it. Like, oh, this actually feels like it's taking us back to that era of radio. And then also just because with Clubhouse, you can put your phone down and you don't have to be looking at it. You don't have to come up to the stage. You can just listen. So it also, I think for a lot of people, even more than radio, was replacing podcasts. And so I would say that Clubhouse has a lot more, I would think, a lot more ability, and I wouldn't even say to replace podcasts because you can't save the audio on there, but I would say to complement podcasts or to be the live podcasting platform. But with radio, I think it's shown like even, just keeps adapting into times. And even if that means that now we have other music apps that are playing the role that radio did before. The other thing I was going to say is it depends on where we're at, because on the continent, radio still plays a much larger role than radio does in the US and actual radio stations. And I can't foresee radio on the continent and probably some other geographic areas as well, but definitely not in Africa being replaced for many reasons. Even just when you talk about smartphone penetration across the continent and how many people actually own smartphones. And then when you get into airtime and people actually having data and people, being able to also have strong signals and stay on Clubhouse for long periods of time, I think that all plays a major role, particularly for us in this conversation as Africa Communications Week and most of us being based on the continent. I think all of those things play a much heavier role for us. So I don't see it replacing it, but it is something that we need to be figuring into when we're writing PR strategies and when we're writing marketing strategies. There needs to be a part. Now, when I sit down with clients, it is something that I built in the same way that we look at LinkedIn, the same way that we look at people tweeting, is to be using Twitter Spaces and to be using Clubhouse. And I would say both and, because they're able to leverage that following that already exists on Twitter and to look at Clubhouse in two ways when we say that. One, what are the clubs that exist? So for instance, the club that brought Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg on and has brought a ton of people on is called Good Times. They're a show that happens every morning. They brought on a ton of guests at that level, high level guests. So look for the programming like that is happening on Clubhouse where you might want to get a client in on. You want to look where they're going to actually be able to get in front of people, especially if you don't have a client who is super well known. If you're working on a campaign, look at the spaces and let me not say spaces, look at the rooms, look at the clubs that are already talking about that and already have the following, because it's like anything else with radio or with an ad, you want to go where the people are instead of just starting from the ground up. Now, if you have somebody who is already more well-known, then, same way Elon Musk came on and it's his first day on, obviously he's going to break the room and all 5,000, 5,000 people to the max came in, or Mark Zuckerberg. But if you're not, have everybody flooding the room, then you want to look at who are the people. Can you have a host who can moderate for you, who already has a large following and who is tied to this? So for instance, I did something for Mississippi when the winter storms hit, because they also got hit, and I have a lot of my dad's family there, and everybody was thinking about Texas. And so I brought in some people who I knew from, who had joined Clubhouse before me, and at the time that I did, who are now big influencers on, and asked them to come sit on the stage. Because what happens is if you have people on the stage who have huge followings, then all of their followers will see that they're speaking in there, and they will come into the room to hear what they're saying, because those are usually people with the huge followings, usually have people who will follow them where they're going and want to hear their conversations, to bring people in so that they could hear about this cause, and know how to be able to support the people in Mississippi who are recovering from the weather and all of the aftermath of it. And then, so there's things you can do like that, but I also brought in people who could be speakers on the stage who already worked on access to water issues, and somebody who had a club called the Water Brigade. So those are some of the ways that you can utilize what is there when you're building campaigns. And then on Spaces, it's the same thing, but you're really utilizing the following on Spaces. And what you want to do on Spaces is you want to make sure that you're tweeting out that it's coming up. And then while it's happening, that whoever your client is that has that following, or the company, that they're using their leverage and the influence that they have with their followers, so that they're not just opening up the space, because again, everyone doesn't always see that up at the top or doesn't know what it is in the fleets, but that they go down to that share button and that they tweet it out while it's happening. And so they may not need to, in the same way, use some of the early adopters in the same way, because they already have the followers. But yeah, just using it to be able to program, I would say think about using it as well, instead of Instagram stories or Instagram TVs, or being able to use it, better yet, in the same way, in complementary way. And I say that to mean the same way some people go on IGTV consistently are doing, quick facts, or doing a reel regularly around whatever aspect of their brand and their content. So if that's like their 5 things for the day or their Monday motivation, then have them do that on Spaces and start to do that consistently and around whatever brand work it is that they're doing. So then people know, okay, I come here every Monday for this Monday motivation piece, or that I come here to hear about this. And so really building it into your brand marketing campaigns and your strategy when you're writing it, the same way that you're using the other platforms, not allowing it to be an afterthought or something that your client has to ask you about. You always want to seem like you're ahead on the trends and that you know what's happening.
Autumn Marie? Marie speaking.
Hey, Marie.
Hey. This is really great. This is, in fact, so insightful. You saw that you have lots of people engaged in the conversation. Unfortunately, we have to stop here. But what I'm asking you guys is to stay tuned with Autumn Marie and stay tuned with ACW. Do not forget to send your tweets under the hashtag ACW 2021 or ACW Africa Comes Week. Autumn Marie, I think, is there to answer to your question. Yes, I see that. Okay. Autumn Marie is still there. Okay, for us at Africa Comes Week, as I was saying, do not forget to register for the next session. And please,